Hi, mystery readers. I'm Alexandra Amor. This is It's a Mystery Podcast, and I'm here today with Elizabeth Spann Craig. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, how are you?
Very well. How are you?
Great, thank you.
Good. Well, let me give our listeners a little introduction to you. Elizabeth Spann Craig is the best-selling cozy mystery author of the Southern Quilting Mysteries, the Memphis Barbeque Mysteries, and the Myrtle Clover Cozy Mysteries. Her blog has been recognized for several years by Writer's Digest as one of their 101 best websites for writers. Elizabeth lives in North Carolina with her family, 2 cats, and an energetic Corgi puppy. And I want to come back to the Corgi puppy in a second, actually. So before we started recording...
Yeah. He's a mess.
Before we started recording, we talked about how what I'd like to do is sort of do an overview of all 3 of your series. So let's do that first. And let's start with Myrtle Clover. So she's in her 80s. She's a retired school teacher. And I read in one of the descriptions that she was described as having a venomous tongue.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit more about Myrtle.
Myrtle, I love to write Myrtle. It's so much fun. It's a little tricky because I feel like she has some unlikable qualities and she's a flawed protagonist. And I think that's what makes her fun to write and hopefully to read. But I have to really kind of be careful that she doesn't cross that line into being completely unlikable. And then the readers are like, we don't really want to hang out with Myrtle anymore. So that's really the challenge with her. She can be a little grouchy sometimes, but she's super bright. And she has this knack for solving mysteries and tripping over bodies. You know, there are just more bodies in this small southern town than you can ever imagine. It's sort of Cabot Cove syndrome at this point. But I was like, as long as we can just kind of suspend our disbelief that this many people would be, dead in this town without the FBI coming in to check out what's going on there. But it's just a fun series, and she's really one of my favorite characters, even though I can't say she's the most favorite because we're not allowed to do that. I think that's like naming our favorite child or something. But
That's right.
She's definitely at the top of my list, that's for sure.
And is you live in North Carolina, and she does as well. Is the town where she lives fictional?
It is, with sort of. It is. It's a lot based on a town I grew up in, which is Anderson, South Carolina. I think it is helpful to write that way if you have a fictional town because you can map it in your head without messing things up. Like I know where everything is in relation to where I grew up, and then I can put another name on the town, change things up a little bit, and it helps me to keep things straight without making mistakes. But it doesn't mean that people in Anderson are like, but no, the duck pond isn't there, it's down, or whatever. So it kind of keeps me from getting into trouble, but it helps me to keep my town straight too.
Yes. Yeah, I can relate to that. The town that I've created is fictional in the town called Horse Mysteries. And at the beginning, I sort of had a vague map in my head. And now I'm realizing I'm going to have to actually draw one because I'm going to start to name things the opposite of where they were in a previous book. And yeah, it's hard to keep track.
It really is. It's
Yeah.
really, really tough. I think that's the downside of a completely fictional town. So
Yeah.
I have actually done that twice. I did that for the Southern Quilting series too. And of course, Memphis, I had Memphis. So I had to actually go to Memphis, make sure I had Memphis straight, really, really straight, making sure that I didn't mess up there because that's an actual town and I actually named it. So that was harder than sort of quasi-fictional.
Yes, exactly. Then you'd have to be really super accurate.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And then one more question about Myrtle. She has a sidekick. Tell us about him.
Miles is her sidekick, and he is he's a little prickly too. He really likes, yeah. Well, maybe it's just Myrtle. Myrtle brings it out in him. I don't think he's as prickly with everybody else. But they make a really good team because he kind of keeps Myrtle in her place. She tends to kind of get a little, out there. And he kind of reels her back in. He's real good for her. He's very patient. He makes sure she doesn't cook too much because she's a really abysmal cook. And he tries to make sure her ego doesn't say, oh, I'm a wonderful cook, and goes around poisoning everybody in the neighborhood with her cooking. So he's a very helpful sidekick to have.
Oh, that's great. I love it that Myrtle is a little bit sort of difficult to get along with, and has that prickly side of her. And where did that come from? She was a school teacher. Was she just used to bossing kids around, or?
Yeah, I think she's a bossy person.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
She is bossy. I think she's a little bit. I'd say she's not resentful about being older. I think she embraces being older, but at the same time, she's very cognizant when somebody expects her not to be as sharp as she is, or expects her not to be able to do all the things that she does. And so maybe a little bit of a chip on her shoulder as far as her age is concerned. And for that reason, I mean, she strikes out and does all of these things on her own. She's very independent, and maybe that just she's just so determined to make sure everybody sees her as somebody very, very capable that I think she maybe takes things a little bit too far sometimes.
Okay, got it. Yeah, excellent. All right, and so then the second series is the Southern Quilting series, also set in North Carolina, and Beatrice Coleman is the protagonist there. Tell us a little bit about her, and how is she different from Myrtle?
She is quite a bit different from Myrtle, I would say. She is quieter than Myrtle. Myrtle is kind of more of an ambivert. She can exist with other people fine, but she can be quiet by herself too. And Beatrice is pretty much a determined introvert. She is in her 60s. She's a retired art museum curator. And she does like to spend a lot of her time alone, or at least she thinks she does. And people keep pulling her out of her house and getting her to do things. And she would rather probably be inside reading a book, she thinks, but she finds that she's also very restless, and it's very hard for her to sit still. And she thinks the retirement's going to be this, lovely lying in a hammock kind of thing, reading a book. And then she finds maybe she's a little too restless to be able to actually enjoy doing that. And she goes out and investigates crimes, because there's a lot of crimes that happen in Dappled Hills too. It's just amazing, these small towns, just people just slaughtered in there. It's just right. Something else.
Yes, exactly. And at the beginning, she joins a quilting group. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. And I noticed that there are some quilting tips in those books as well. Do you quilt? You must quilt.
Oh boy, no, I
Oh.
don't. I have done so many hours of research. I could theoretically make a quilt. But I have not. I would not actually try that. I'm a very uncoordinated person, and I have a feeling that disaster would ensue. Although you can machine quilt, and it's a lot easier than some of the hand piecing and all, but it's just such an incredible art. I have a lot of respect for the people who do it. So I have spent a good deal of time trying to make sure that everything is very accurate for that. That was a book that Penguin asked me to write, Penguin Books, and so
okay.
I said okay, and they said, can you do this? And I said, I definitely can, with lots of confidence. And then I set out and just watched YouTube and read books and magazines and talked to quilters and went to shows and all of that. So it was a good deal of research to do, but it was fun. It was very rewarding, and I found out a lot of information about quilting.
And still you don't have the bug to do it yourself? No.
I have just, I know that I really am not a crafty person. It's like I go into craft stores and I start kind of, breaking out in hives a little bit, and I have to immediately ask for help, from somebody working there. And I'm always panicked that I can't find whatever it is my daughter needs, craft-wise or whatever. So, I have a feeling it would end in disaster. It might be an expensive disaster, so that kind of prevents me from...
Yes.
Quilting is expensive.
It really is, yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so we mentioned corgis at the beginning. There's a corgi on the front of each of these books. So have you been a long time corgi fan?
Yes, I have. We had a corgi. Let's see. I guess my daughter is okay. So that would have been 10 years ago. We had our first corgi, about 10 or 12 years ago, actually, I guess. And they're just a fantastic breed. They're just so smart and fun, and they're just great companions, and they would do anything for you. And so we have a second corgi now, because our first corgi that the books were based around, unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. But so we've got this corgi puppy now, and he looks quite a bit different from our first one, but it's okay. He's being represented on the covers in spirit. So
yes, exactly. And so did you ask the publisher to do that for you, to put the corgi on the front?
No, I think they thought that would be fun
Okay.
because Penguin, the way that they like to do their cozy covers is they want to have it be this very kind of, again, a very cozy, comforting kind of an environment on the cover with a hint of some trouble. So they'll have like, you'll have the glass of wine that's spilt over or something will be amuck on the cover.
Right.
And if they have an animal in the books, I mean, Penguin almost, I mean, I can't even imagine a series where they wouldn't do this. They want the animal right up there on the cover
Okay.
to indicate there's so many animal lovers who are cozy fans. And I think they really want to kind of pull that element in there too. So you have not only the craft element, but you also have the animal element in the books. And that's something that they would do for just their marketing department would take that and run with it.
Okay, got it. So you wrote the corgi based on your dog, and then they made the choice to include him on the cover, her on the cover.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Got it. All right. And then the third series, which you use a pen name, Riley Adams, is the Memphis Barbecue series, and Lulu Taylor is the protagonist there. Tell us a bit about Lulu and her Aunt Pat's restaurant.
Yes, so Lulu Taylor is in her 60s, and she is the matriarch of this family that owns a barbecue restaurant that used to belong to her Aunt Pat, who is now deceased. And she loves the restaurant. It's sort of one of those places in Memphis where everybody goes and they have like cool memorabilia on the walls, and it's sort of a meeting place, hangout. Very much maybe in some, well, not exactly like, I was going to say like the Rendezvous restaurant, but Rendezvous is down in a basement, very different from Aunt Pat's, but similar choice of food and kind of that family feeling, and very similar with the memorabilia on the walls. Mm-hmm. And Lulu, again, has this sort of penchant for running into dead bodies, which is, the common theme with these three protagonists.
Right.
And she's very protective over her family, and she's the extrovert of the group. So we've got an extrovert, we've got an ambivert, and we've got an introvert. And so I've got the whole spectrum covered there.
Right. Yes.
So I think her being an extrovert, she goes out into the public more often. And so she actually, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit more likely that she'd be running into bodies the way she is behaving.
Got it. Okay. And so the first two series that we talked about set in North Carolina. What made you choose Memphis? Tennessee is right next door to North Carolina, which I had to look up on a map, by the way. But yeah, why?
I can understand that.
Why Memphis?
You're forgiven.
Thank you.
You're Canadian.
Yeah, exactly.
I would have no idea, so you're good.
Okay, good. Yeah. So
Well,
what was it about Memphis? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, actually, the publisher, again, this is another one of those situations where Penguin came to me and asked if I could write a series based in Memphis. And they wanted it to be centered around a barbecue restaurant. And they wanted it set, I know this is kind of extraordinary. They wanted it set in Memphis, and they wanted certain things that would happen there. And I was allowed to take that and run with it. But at the time, the Neelys on Food Network was quite a popular show, and they were trying to kind of build on that. So they had a specific idea that they wanted me to work on. With the Southern Quilting Mysteries, they did come to me and they said, we want quilting and we want it set in the South, and you just run with it. Whatever you want to do is fine. With Memphis, I was not well known at the time. Not that I'm well known now, but I'm more well known now than I was then. So I think they just gave me some more guidelines to work with, and I was happy to do that and run with it. And that did mean that I did actually go to Memphis and spend, a long time there with my family, walking it and making notes and just going to lots of different Memphis landmarks, which was a lot of fun. I'd not ever been.
Oh, that's amazing. And you didn't feel restricted at all by those guidelines that they had given you?
I mean, you do, but in a way, it's more of a creative challenge because you have these parameters that you need to work in. Mm-hmm. In a way, it's not more fun. Obviously, coming up with something completely from scratch is probably more fun. But in a lot of ways, it was such a creative challenge. It kind of, I don't know, it really kind of got my brain going, thinking about new ways of spinning stuff, because they were very specific about what they wanted. So in a way, it was kind of like writing on assignment, but it was a cool assignment, and it was one that I thought was, it was fun to take on. So I enjoyed it.
Oh, that's good. Okay, good. And are you currently still writing all three series?
No, I'm only writing the two Southern Quilting Mysteries and the Myrtle Clover series, and both of those are independent now. I'm writing them myself, self-publishing them.
Oh,
I got
okay.
my character rights back from Penguin after Tying the Knot, which was book 5.
Oh, okay, great. And because they both have ones coming up in 2018. So there's a new Myrtle Clover in early 2018, and then a new quilting mystery in summer of 2018.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Okay, yeah. And are
Running
you?
on schedule.
Yeah, exactly. And so do you alternate when you write them then?
I do.
Mm-hmm.
What I do is I write one book and then I write a quick outline for the following book in that same series, and because that way it's very fresh in my mind, and the characters, the town, everything is just right there. It makes it so much easier to write a nice long outline and just run with it. And then I pick up the outline that I wrote months before for the other series and start writing on that and working on that. And that seems to be the way that works best. I've tried quite a few different ways, and this one seems like it works a little bit better for me.
Oh, that's great. And I mentioned before we were started recording that I had found an interview with you on the Creative Pen, Joanna Penn's website. And what couple things I noticed was one was that in 2011 you had 3 mysteries out, and now you have 24. I think I counted correctly.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So that was
And there's a zombie book in there somewhere too. I don't know if that's counted. I've lost track. 24, 25.
yeah, I didn't count the zombie one, so that would be 25. So that's 6 years and 21, 22 books. So you obviously write really quickly. What's your writing routine like? Do you write every day, obviously?
I do. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not like, obviously if I hurt my back one day last week or a few days, at some point last week or 10 days ago, and I was a big baby about that. For some reason that really I was writing, but I was like, this is bad. What I'm writing is just bad. And I was on, I had a muscle relaxer. I was like, this is not good. So I was like, fine, I don't have to, I don't have to write every day. But in general, I do write at least 3 pages a day. These are double spaced. It's not a lot. I mean, it's like 750 words, something like that. But it adds up, obviously, if you're just really consistent with it. And I think the difference between me and probably some other writers is I write pretty clean. So I don't really do a lot of revision. It's pretty much exactly going to print that way. Obviously, I'm changing, and I have continuity errors, I have typos and things like that my editor helps me to straighten out. But there's not a lot of big changes usually going on after a write-in. I think that saves me a lot of time. I know it saves me a lot of time. So I'm fast. I mean, I could be faster. I could write more than I do. I mean, there's 3 pages. There are people who would be like, okay, I could double that, triple that, quadruple that. I'm sure I could. And, during Nano, I was like, oh, I'll write a little bit more because it's kind of fun because everybody's doing, a challenge. And so but I wouldn't write that much more. I mean, I might write like 1,100 words or something like that. But yeah. That's it.
Well, and don't they say too that consistency over time is the real crux of the whole thing? So, somebody might write 5,000 words a day and then not write for 3 weeks. But if you're writing 750 words every weekday, it adds up after a while. Yeah.
It's like the rabbit and the tortoise and the hare, right?
Exactly.
So I'm just kind of plodding along. I'm sort of the Pepe Le Pew who ends up catching up with the cat and Bugs Bunny cartoons, just sort of just plodding along, and I get there though.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. No kidding. And one of the things I mentioned that interview on the Creative Pen, one of the things you guys talked about was clues and red herrings. And it got me thinking about how that razor sharp line between giving readers enough information and not too much to be insulting and not withholding stuff and making it unfair to them. Could you talk about that a little bit and how you find that balance?
Yeah, and you're right. It's tricky because I mean the books that I have really disliked that I've read that are mysteries are ones where you think it's about money. And that's the motive, and it's carried all the way through to the end of the book, and then suddenly at the end of the book, and it's like a twist, it's not about that at all. It's about somebody's, revenge on something, and that's fine. I mean, it's sort of a twist, but it's not really fair. I mean, you think it's the same. I don't know. It's just kind of taking it a little bit too far, And so I think there's the point where you don't want readers to get frustrated with it. And so for me, what I do is I have every suspect tells the truth and they tell a lie. And that keeps my sleuth guessing. And also she's able to eliminate, certain things. I mean, she can go to the next interview with a suspect and maybe they can say something that's completely different from the other suspect. And I don't know, it just sort of makes it so it doesn't go on too far and it makes it fair and interesting, I think. The clues are a little tricky because you have to be really upfront with the reader. So usually what I'll do is it's sort of a sleight of hand thing where you show the clue and then something distracting happens that seems much more important.
Right.
And so you distract from it. It's almost like a magician. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you have a way that you track the lies and the truth that each of your suspects have told, or do you keep all that information in your head?
Oh, no, I don't keep that in my head. My head would explode and I would start making all kinds of terrible, terrible mistakes in the book, no doubt. I have an outline.
Okay.
And my outline is, it's a real basic. Actually, you can see my outline online.
Okay.
I've posted up there, just kind of give everybody a general idea how I do things, but it's an interview and I do lie, truth, alibi, where the interview took place. And I have that for each suspect as I go through, and I have 2 bodies for each book. So I've got like one set of interviews with that information and then a second set of interviews with the same information. So it's not, I would say it's a pattern for sure. I hate to say it's a formula, but you can see it. I mean, especially maybe after you see the outline, you can definitely see that.
Yes. Oh, that's amazing. Well, I will put a link in the show notes at itsamysterypodcast.com to that, to that post, and people can see and just see how you do it.
Cool. That sounds great.
Yeah, a little bit of a peek behind the screen at the magician there. So we talked about the upcoming books. So then one last question just before we go. What are your plans going forward? Are you just going to continue working those 2 series, or do you have plans for anything new?
I think for a little while I'm going to work on the 2 series. I think Myrtle, I can't even imagine an end for Myrtle. I'm going to say right now, I don't think there's going to be an end for Myrtle. It's just going to continue until people say stop writing Myrtle. And then I'll probably still write Myrtle. I just won't release them. I'll just have like secret little Myrtle books, in my house because I just love her and she's fun.
Yeah.
But Southern Quilting, we'll see. I'm kind of getting to a point where things are going to change because Beatrice just got married to Wyatt. So that's changing a little bit. So we'll see how far I can go with the storyline there. And then, yes, I definitely want to write a new series. So I have no ideas for that right now. So I'm working on it though.
Okay, you anticipated my question. Yeah. And it'll be nice to just see in terms of inspiration what shows up for you.
It'll be fun. That's something different. I haven't done that for a while.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Something different. Yeah. Well, this has been amazing, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. So why don't you let our listeners know where they can find out more about you and your books?
Yes, you can get pretty much everywhere on my website, which is elizabethspancraig.com. I'm on Twitter, Elizabeth S. Craig. And I think you can, between those 2 sites, I'm on Facebook, Elizabeth Span Craig author too.
Okay. Great.
And I answer my emails. So if you send me an email, you can find that on Contact Me. Love to hear from people.
Okay, cool. And we mentioned at the very outset that you have a blog for writers, and they can link to that from elizabethspancraig.com.
It is. It's under blog on my website, and it's pretty much all for writers, readers, and you're welcome to go there and see. It may not be very interesting, but hopefully writers will enjoy it.
Yes. Good. Okay, great. Well, thank you again so much. It's been great having you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.